Sarah Rivera stood at the edge of her inherited property, watching the sun bleed across the Wyoming sky. 8 years of military service had taught her to appreciate these quiet moments, even as they felt hollow now. The ranch stretched before her, 40 acres of grassland she'd never wanted, left to her by an uncle she'd barely known. But when the army had finally agreed, her hands shook too much for surgical instruments. When the nightmares had become louder than mornings, this isolation had seemed like mercy. She flexed her scarred fingers, studying the tremors that had ended her career as a combat medic. The silver bracelet on her wrist, standard issue, engraved with her medical identification number, caught the fading light. In Afghanistan, those hands had sutured wounds under fire, had compressed arteries while mortars fell, had fought death itself for 18-hour shifts. Now they couldn't hold a scalpel steady for 18 seconds. The house behind her felt too large, too empty. 3 bedrooms for one person, a kitchen she barely used, and boxes she hadn't unpacked in the 6 months since arriving. The locals in Sage Creek kept their distance, respecting what they assumed was grief. They didn't understand that grief would have been simpler than this weight of having survived when others hadn't, of carrying memories that played on repeat like broken records. Each morning began the same way, coffee at 0500, just like in Kandahar. Check the perimeter, now fence lines instead of base security. Inventory supplies, now horse feed and tools instead of medical kits and plasma bags. The routine helped, even if it felt like play acting at normalcy. The ranch had been her uncle's dream, not hers. Jake Rivera, Vietnam veteran, horse whisperer, certifiable eccentric by town standards. He'd left everything to his niece he'd met exactly 3 times, along with a letter that said simply, "The horses will save you if you let them." Sarah had sold his 2 quarter horses within a week of arriving. She wasn't ready to be saved. Afghanistan haunted her in fragments, the weight of body armor in 120-degree heat, the metallic taste of dust and blood, the faces of the ones she couldn't save. Specialist Martinez, 22, who'd bled out while she'd fought to clamp his femoral artery. Private Washington, 19, whose chest wound had bubbled despite her best efforts. Sergeant Kim, whose eyes had gone distant while Sarah screamed for more onegative that would never come. Her therapist at the VA had suggested journaling. Instead, Sarah walked the fence lines at dawn and dusk, counting posts like rosary beads. 1 atwibrieth. 456brieth. The numbers helped when the anxiety clawed at her chest, when her hands shook too hard to hold a coffee cup. The locals whispered, of course. Sarah caught fragments at the feed store, at the gas station, in sideways glances at the diner where she picked up takeout every Tuesday. That Rivera girl, they'd say. Keeps to herself. Something happened over there. Jake should have left the place to someone who'd use it. They weren't wrong. The ranch was underutilized, its pastures growing wild, its stable standing empty. Sarah had made only essential repairs, fixed the leaking roof, replaced rusted gate hinges, mended gaps in the fence where determined deer pushed through. The rest could wait. Everything could wait. Her cell phone, a lifeline she simultaneously craved and dreaded, connected her to a world that felt increasingly distant. Texts from army buddies who were moving on, marriages, children, graduate school. They shared photos of normal lives while Sarah cataloged fence posts and fought sleep to avoid dreams where she failed again and again. The VA doctor had increased her medication last month. Adjustment takes time, he'd said, like Sarah was a malfunctioning engine requiring fine-tuning. The pills helped with the sharp edges of panic but left her feeling muffled, like she was experiencing life through gauze. Better than the alternative, when every unexpected sound sent her reaching for a weapon she no longer carried. She'd tried, initially. Accepted a dinner invitation from the neighbors, the Hendersons, who ran cattle on the adjacent property. Made it through appetizers before Mrs. Henderson's story about their son's high school football injury sent Sarah spiraling into a flashback of treating blast wounds. She'd excused herself before the main course, drove home with white knuckles on the steering wheel. The isolation wasn't healing, exactly, but it was manageable. Predictable. Safe. The ranch's emptiness echoed her own, and there was comfort in that symmetry. She maintained the property like she'd maintained equipment in the army, methodically, precisely, without emotional investment. Evenings were the hardest. As the sun set behind the mountains, the big sky felt less like freedom and more like exposure. In Afghanistan, twilight had meant increased danger, the golden hour when insurgents moved under cover of shifting light. Here, it meant silence so complete she could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of unspoken words she'd never gotten to say to the soldiers who died under her care. Jake's letter sat in the kitchen drawer, alongside unpaid bills and grocery receipts. "The horses will save you if you let them." She'd read it exactly once, then folded it away. Jake had found salvation in damaged creatures, had built a reputation for gentling horses others had written off. Sarah had spent 8 years trying to save people and had learned that sometimes salvation was a luxury you couldn't afford. The fence line stretched ahead, posts marching toward the horizon like soldiers in formation. Sarah touched her medic bracelet, a habit that soothed even when her hands betrayed her. Tomorrow would be the same: wake, walk, count, survive. It was enough. It had to be enough. Her phone buzzed, a text from her former commanding officer. "Checking in. How's civilian life?" Sarah typed and deleted 3 responses before settling on, adjusting. It was neither truth nor lie, just the space between where most of her life existed now. The stars were emerging, brilliant in the high desert air. In Kandahar, she'd rarely seen them through the dust and light pollution. Here, they felt almost aggressive in their clarity, demanding to be witnessed. Sarah turned back toward the house, its windows dark except for the kitchen light she always left on, a beacon in case she needed to find her way home after the nightmares. Inside, she heated a frozen dinner, ate standing at the counter. The dining table was covered with mail she hadn't sorted, sympathy cards from her uncle's funeral she hadn't answered. The grandfather clock in the living room, another inheritance she didn't want, ticked away seconds that felt both too fast and too slow. Before bed, she laid out tomorrow's clothes with military precision: jeans, work shirt, boots aligned perfectly. The routine mattered more than the clothes themselves. Structure was survival. Order was sanity. These small rituals kept the chaos at bay, even if they couldn't fill the emptiness. In bed, Sarah ran through her evening checklist: doors locked, windows secure, keys and phone within reach. She kept her boots beside the bed, laced loose enough to slip on quickly, a habit from deployment she couldn't shake. The house creaked and settled around her, sounds she catalogued and dismissed: wind, wood contracting, nothing threatening. As sleep approached, she focused on tomorrow's tasks: check the eastern fence line, clear debris from the creek, inventory supplies in the barn. Simple objectives, measurable outcomes. Nothing like the chaos of a field hospital, where success and failure blurred into each other, where sometimes survival felt like its own kind of defeat. Sarah closed her eyes and counted fence posts instead of bodies, measured distance in acres instead of arterial sprays. Tomorrow would come, bringing its own small battles. For now, this careful emptiness would suffice. She pulled the blankets higher and waited for dawn. The morning fog clung to the valley like smoke from distant fires, muffling sound and distorting distance. Sarah pulled her jacket tighter against the October chill as she walked the eastern fence line, her routine patrol nothing more than muscle memory now. The posts stretched ahead in their familiar rhythm, one a tweebrieth, when something broke the pattern. A shape in the mist, wrong somehow. Dark against the silver grass, too large for debris, too still for wildlife. Sarah's training kicked in before conscious thought: assess, approach, evaluate. Her boots moved silently through the wet grass as her heartbeat accelerated, that familiar combat tension returning to her shoulders. Then she saw it clearly, and her breath caught. A horse. No, not just a horse, a Mustang, unmistakable in its raw-boned wildness. Tangled in the lower strands of barbed wire, the mare lay on her side, her chest heaving with labored breaths. Blood seeped into the frost-covered earth beneath her, dark and accusatory. Sarah approached slowly, noting details with a medic's eye: bay coat matted with mud and worse, white blaze down the face now stained pink, approximately 7 years old based on teeth she could glimpse through pulled-back lips. The mare's eyes, liquid brown, rimmed with white, tracked her movement with fading alertness. The wire had caught the horse at the shoulder and wrapped around her left hind leg, the barbs embedding deeper with each struggle. Deep lacerations crossed her chest and neck. The trapped leg hung at an angle that made Sarah's stomach clench, broken, possibly compound fracture beneath the swelling. Infection had already set in, she could smell it, that sweet sick odor she knew too well from field hospitals. Easy, Sarah murmured, though she wasn't sure if she spoke to the horse or herself. She reached for her phone with hands suddenly steady, the crisis focusing her in a way nothing had in months. Easy, girl. I'm going to help. The mare's ears flicked toward her voice, but she didn't fight as Sarah photographed the scene, documenting the injury pattern. Professional detachment, just like triage. Don't think about the pain, just catalog the damage. Dr. Mitchell arrived 40 minutes later, his veterinary truck bouncing over the rutted access road. Sarah had spent the time talking softly to the mare, not touching yet, just maintaining presence. The horse's breathing had grown more labored, but those eyes, God, those eyes held hers with an intensity that felt like recognition. Jesus, Mitchell muttered, setting down his bag. Wild one. Probably from the Canyon Creek herd. He pulled on examination gloves with practiced efficiency. How long you figure she's been here? Based on the blood coagulation, maybe 6 hours. Could be more. Mitchell glanced at her sharply. You a vet now, Rivera? Combat medic. 8 years. He nodded, returning to his examination. His hands moved over the mare's injuries, gentle but thorough. The horse barely flinched, too exhausted or too far gone to care. Frank, Sarah. Mitchell sat back on his heels. The legs fractured in at least 2 places. These wounds are already septic. Even if we could treat the infections, that leg. He shook his head. She's suffering. The humane thing, no. The word escaped before Sarah could stop it. Mitchell raised an eyebrow. Look at her condition. She's been struggling for hours, probably all night. A healthy horse doesn't just give up like this. The kindest thing, I said no. Sarah. His voice gentled, the way people spoke to trauma victims. I know you're new to ranching, but sometimes we have to make hard decisions. This mare is too far gone. Even if we got her standing, she'd never be sound. Wild horses need 4 good legs to survive. It's kinder to end it now. Sarah knelt beside the mare's head. The horse's eye met hers, and in that gaze she saw something achingly familiar, not resignation, but a fierce desire to live despite everything. The same look she'd seen in wounded soldiers who statistically should have died but fought anyway. I've seen worse injuries recover, Sarah said quietly. In Afghanistan, we had a saying, until they're dead, they're alive. This mare is still breathing. She's still looking at me. She's still alive. This isn't a field hospital. She's a wild animal, not a soldier. Pain is pain. The will to survive is the will to survive. Sarah's hand found her medic bracelet. I've got decent medical supplies from my service. There's morphine in my emergency kit, veterinary grade. I checked the regulations before moving here. I can start in 4-line, manage the pain while we figure this out. Mitchell pinched the bridge of his nose. Even if you stabilize her, there's the leg. The infection. She's malnourished, probably been struggling to keep up with her herd for weeks. And we haven't even discussed the cost. I don't care about the cost. Your uncle wouldn't have, my uncle isn't here. The words came out harder than intended. Sarah softened her tone. Look, I know I'm asking a lot. But I've seen too many lives end because someone decided they weren't worth saving. If she dies, she dies. But not because we didn't try. Mitchell studied her for a long moment. You sure about this? Once we start, she's your responsibility. The care, the bills, the heartbreak if it doesn't work out. Sarah looked at the mare, really looked. Beneath the mud and blood, she could see the horse's true conformation, strong despite malnourishment, built for endurance. The white blaze made a lightning bolt down her face, ending in a pink snip on her muzzle. Her mane, where it wasn't matted with debris, showed deep mahogany highlights. This was a survivor, like the soldiers who'd somehow pulled through when medicine said they shouldn't. I'm sure. Mitchell sighed. All right. But we do this my way. First, we need to get her out of this wire without causing more damage. Then transport to your barn. You've got that old stall Jake used for medical cases. I'll need to surgically clean these wounds, set the leg if possible. She'll need round-the-clock care for at least a week, assuming she survives the first 24 hours. I can do that. Sarah. He waited until she met his eyes. I need you to understand. Even if we save her life, she'll probably never be rideable. That leg might heal, but not well enough for anything beyond walking. She'll be a pasture ornament at best. She doesn't need to be rideable. She just needs to live. Mitchell shook his head but reached for his wire cutters. Jake was the same kind of stubborn. All right, let's see what we can do. The next 2 hours passed in focused activity. Sarah found herself slipping into familiar rhythms, anticipating needs, maintaining sterile fields, monitoring vital signs. When they finally transferred the mare to the barn, she was unconscious but stable, and 4-line dripping fluids into her jugular. I'll be back this evening to check on her, Mitchell said, packing his equipment. Call if anything changes. And Sarah? He paused at the barn door. You're either brave or foolish. Time will tell which. After he left, Sarah sat in the straw beside the unconscious mare. The barn was quiet except for the steady drip of the fore and the horse's labored breathing. Late afternoon sun slanted through the high windows, turning dust motes into tiny stars. I know what you're feeling, Sarah whispered. That place between living and dying, where everything hurts but you can't let go yet. She touched the mare's neck carefully, avoiding the bandaged areas. In Kandahar, they brought me a private who'd taken shrapnel to the chest. Everyone said he was done, too much damage, too much blood loss. But he kept looking at me with eyes just like yours. The mare's ear twitched slightly. He lived, Sarah continued. Went home to his family in Oregon. Sends me Christmas cards with pictures of his kids. She adjusted the foredrip. You're going to live too. I don't know why yet, but I know you're supposed to be here. We both are. Outside, the fog had lifted, revealing the autumn colors painting the distant mountains. Sarah had avoided her usual evening fence walk to stay with the mare. For the first time in months, the break in routine didn't send anxiety crawling up her spine. Instead, she felt something she'd almost forgotten: purpose. Around sunset, the mare stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then finding Sarah's face. The raw intelligence in that gaze made Sarah's breath catch. This wasn't just an animal in pain, this was a soul recognizing another soul, survivor acknowledging survivor. "Hey there," Sarah murmured. "Welcome back." The mare tried to lift her head, but Sarah gently pressed it down. "Not yet. You've got a long way to go before you're dancing again. But we'll get there." She checked the foreline, adjusted the blanket covering the horse's body. One battle at a time. As darkness fell, Sarah switched on the barn's single bulb. She'd need to bring out a camping cot, prepare for a long night of monitoring. The mare's eyes followed her movements, alert now despite the pain medication. Settling back into the straw, Sarah pulled out her phone to text her commanding officer. "Found someone who needs help more than I do. Might be healing both of us." The mare whickered softly, the first sound she'd made since rescue. Sarah reached out, let the horse slip at her fingers, not seeking food, just contact. "Yeah," Sarah whispered. "Me too." The infection raged like wildfire through the mare's system, turning her skin hot beneath Sarah's careful touch. 3 days had passed since the rescue, 3 days of fever spikes and labored breathing, of Sarah catching fragments of sleep on the cot beside the stall. The mare's temperature climbed to 104 degrees, her legs swelling despite the antibiotics Mitchell had prescribed. "You're not giving up on me now," Sarah murmured, replacing another cold compress on the horse's neck. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, muscle memory from countless night shifts in field hospitals. "We've come too far for that." The mare's eyes, glazed with fever, still tracked Sarah's movements. That spark of intelligence remained, even as her body fought the spreading infection. Sarah had seen that look before, in soldiers who clung to life through sheer force of will. Mitchell arrived for his morning check, his expression grave as he examined the worsening wounds. "The infection's not responding to the antibiotics. We might need to switch to something stronger, but..." He trailed off, studying the swollen leg. "Sarah, I need to be honest. This isn't looking good." "Change the antibiotics then." "It's not that simple. Her kidney function is compromised. A stronger medication could what? Kill her?" Sarah's laugh held no humor. "She's already dying. At least this way she has a chance." Mitchell set down his stethoscope. "Sometimes the kindest thing, stop." Sarah's voice cracked with exhaustion. "Just stop with the kindest thing speech. I've heard it. I've given it. I know what you're going to say, and I know you mean well, but I can't." "Not yet." The veterinarian studied her for a long moment. "This isn't about the horse anymore, is it?" Sarah's hand found her medic bracelet, thumb rubbing the worn metal. "In Kandahar, we had this kid, Private Washington. 19 years old, chest wound, lost too much blood before the medevac arrived. I was working on him when his heart stopped. Standard protocol said to call it after 30 minutes of CPR, but I couldn't. I just couldn't." "How long did you continue?" 47 minutes. My CO had to physically pull me away." Sarah's eyes remained fixed on the mare. "Everyone said I did everything I could, that sometimes we lose patience despite our best efforts. But all I could think was that somewhere, his mother was waiting for him to come home. And he didn't. No. He didn't. Sarah straightened her shoulders. But this mare still might. So please, just, help me try. Mitchell nodded slowly. All right. We'll adjust the treatment plan. But Sarah, you need to prepare yourself. Even if we beat the infection, that leg. One battle at a time. After Mitchell left, Sarah settled back into her vigil. The barn had become her world, hay dust and antiseptic, the rhythmic drip of 4 fluids, the mare's labored breathing. She'd barely left except for essential tasks, delegating the fence repairs she'd obsessed over just days ago. That afternoon, Ray Henderson from the neighboring ranch appeared in the barn doorway. Heard you're playing nursemaid to a wild horse, he said, not unkindly. Folks in town are talking. Let them talk. Sarah. Ray removed his hat, turning it in his hands. I know you're new to ranching, but sometimes these wild ones. They're not meant to be saved. It's not cruel, it's just nature. Nature also gave her the will to survive. I'm just honoring that. Ray sighed. Your Uncle Jake had a soft spot for lost causes too. Nearly went broke trying to save every damaged horse in the county. Just, be careful you don't follow him down that path. After he left, Sarah returned to the mare, who was attempting to shift position despite the pain. Ignore him, Sarah said softly. They don't understand. They see a broken horse, a lost cause. I see a fighter who hasn't given up yet. The mare's ears flicked toward her voice. Sarah had been talking constantly, about Afghanistan, about her medical training, about the uncle she'd barely known. The sound seemed to calm the horse, or maybe it calmed Sarah. The line between healer and patient had blurred. That evening, the mare's fever finally broke. Sarah almost missed it, exhausted as she was, but suddenly the horse's skin felt cooler, her breathing less labored. Sarah checked the thermometer twice, not trusting the reading, 101. 5 degrees. There you go, she whispered, feeling tears threaten. There's my fighter. But as one crisis resolved, another emerged. The mare, more alert now, began showing signs of severe anxiety. She'd flinch at sudden movements, her eyes rolling white when anyone but Sarah approached. The trauma of the injury, or perhaps whatever had driven her from her herd, had left psychological scars as deep as the physical ones. PTSD recognizes PTSD, Sarah murmured, observing the mare's hypervigilance. She understood too well that constant state of alert, the way trauma rewired your nervous system until danger seemed to lurk in every shadow. She began spending nights in the stall, talking through her own memories while the mare listened. In Afghanistan, the worst wasn't the obvious dangers, the firefights, the mortars. It was the quiet moments when you couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. That's what they don't tell you about coming home. Your body might be safe, but your mind stays in the war zone. The mare nickered softly, her head turning toward Sarah's voice. Yeah, you get it, don't you? Something happened to you too. Something that made you run until you couldn't run anymore. Over the next few days, they developed a routine. Sarah would enter the stall slowly, announcing herself with a specific whistle. She'd check the healing wounds, adjust medications, all while maintaining a steady stream of conversation. The mare began to anticipate these sessions, her ears pricking forward at Sarah's approach. But the leg remained problematic. The swelling had reduced, but the fractures weren't healing properly. Mitchell warned that even with surgery, the mare might never walk without a severe limp. She doesn't need to run races, Sarah replied. She just needs to stand on her own feet. And if she can't? If she's in constant pain? Then we'll deal with that when it happens. Right now, she's fighting. As long as she wants to fight, I'll fight with her. The breakthrough came on day 7. Sarah was changing the 4-bag when thunder cracked overhead, one of those sudden autumn storms that swept across Wyoming without warning. The mare startled violently, her injured leg striking the stall wall. Sarah moved without thinking, positioning herself between the horse and the wall, absorbing the impact with her shoulder. "Easy, easy," she soothed, even as pain shot down her arm. "It's just weather. You're safe here." The mare's eyes were wild with fear, but she stopped thrashing. Instead, she pressed her forehead against Sarah's chest, trembling. Sarah wrapped her arms around the horse's neck, feeling the rapid heartbeat against her own. "I know," she whispered. "Loud noises are hard. They take you right back there, don't they? To whatever scared you badly enough to run through barbed wire." They stayed like that as the storm raged outside, two wounded souls finding comfort in shared understanding. When the thunder finally faded, the mare lifted her head and, for the first time, nuzzled Sarah's cheek with genuine affection. That night, Sarah finally slept deeply, the mare standing guard over her makeshift bed in the straw. She woke once to find the horse had carefully lowered herself to lie nearby, close enough that Sarah could feel her warm breath. The next morning brought another challenge. 3 local ranchers arrived together, their trucks pulling up to the barn with determined purpose. Sarah recognized them from the feed store: Jim Crawford, Pete Williams, and Dale Morrison, all longtime Valley residents who'd known her uncle. "Sarah," Jim began, clearly elected spokesman, "we need to talk about this horse situation." "There's nothing to talk about. Now, hold on. We're not here to cause trouble. But you've got to understand, keeping a wild Mustang, especially an injured one, it sets a precedent. We've got herds coming through our properties already, eating grazing meant for cattle. If word gets out you're taking in strays." "She's not a stray. She's a patient." Pete stepped forward. "Your uncle understood the balance out here. Wild horses have their place, but my uncle left me this ranch to do with as I see fit." "Jake also knew when to let nature take its course," Dale added quietly. Sarah felt her temper rising, but the mare nickered softly behind her, a calming influence. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern. But this horse earned her chance at life. She fought through that barbed wire, survived a night in freezing temperatures, and is battling back from infections that should have killed her. If that kind of will doesn't deserve respect, I don't know what does." The ranchers exchanged glances. Jim cleared his throat. "Just remember, Sarah, you can't save them all." "I'm not trying to save them all. I'm trying to save this one." After they left, Sarah slumped against the stall door. The mare limped over, still unsteady but mobile, and rested her chin on Sarah's shoulder. "Looks like we're both outcasts now," Sarah murmured. "The crazy veteran and her broken Mustang. Quite a pair, aren't we?" That afternoon, Mitchell arrived with X-ray results. The news was mixed. The fractures were beginning to knit, but imperfectly. The mare would likely always have a limp, possibly significant. But she'll walk? She'll walk. Maybe even trot, eventually. But her running days are over. Sarah looked at the mare, who was pulling at a hay net with determined appetite. "That's okay. Sometimes just standing is victory enough." As the day waned, Sarah realized something had shifted. The constant anxiety that had gripped her chest for months had loosened. The tremor in her hands, while still present, seemed less pronounced. In focusing on the mare's healing, she'd found a path toward her own. "You know," she told the horse as she prepared the evening medications, "I think we might just make it through this together." The mare whickered in response, a sound that might have been agreement. Outside, storm clouds gathered again on the horizon, but inside the barn, two survivors had found their sanctuary. The blizzard struck without mercy, transforming the Wyoming landscape into a white void where sky and earth merged into one howling fury. Sarah had seen the weather reports, but nothing prepared her for the violence of the storm: wind that screamed like incoming mortars, snow that hit exposed skin like shrapnel. The power died just after midnight, plunging the barn into darkness. "Easy, girl," Sarah called out, feeling her way to the emergency lantern. The mare nickered nervously, her injury making her more vulnerable to the sudden drop in temperature. Sarah's hands shook as she lit the lantern, not from fear this time, but from the bone-deep cold seeping through the barn walls. She grabbed extra blankets from the tack room, layering them over the mare's back. The temperature was plummeting fast, she could see her breath in the lantern light. The mare's injured leg needed to stay warm to prevent further complications, but Sarah's supply of blankets was limited. As she worked, exhaustion hit her like a physical force. 2 weeks of round-the-clock care, sleeping in fragments, the constant worry, it all crashed over her at once. She stumbled, catching herself against the stall wall. Her vision grayed at the edges. "Just need to rest for a minute," she mumbled, sliding down to sit in the straw. The cold seemed less biting down here, or maybe she was just too tired to care. Her eyes closed without her permission. She didn't know how long she'd been unconscious when she felt the warmth. Confused, she opened her eyes to find the mare had somehow lowered herself to the ground beside her. Despite her injuries, the horse had positioned her large body between Sarah and the barn door where the worst drafts entered. The mare's neck curved around her, sharing precious body heat. "What are you doing?" Sarah whispered, touched beyond words. "You can barely stand." "You shouldn't be," the mare nickered softly, her breath warm against Sarah's face. In that moment, their roles reversed, the patient becoming the protector. They stayed like that for hours, the storm raging outside while they created their own small sphere of warmth and safety. Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness, always aware of the mare's steady presence. During one of her more lucid moments, she noticed the horse's ears constantly swiveling, alert to every sound despite her own exhaustion. Near dawn, the wind shifted, creating an eerie lull in the storm. That's when Sarah heard it, a sound that didn't belong. High-pitched, desperate, barely audible above the wind. The mare heard it too, her head lifted, nostrils flaring. "What is it, girl?" Sarah struggled to her feet, every muscle protesting. The mare was trying to stand as well, favoring her injured leg but determined. The sound came again, definitely equine, young, terrified. A foal's cry. "Oh God," Sarah breathed. "There's a baby out there." The mare released a powerful neigh, the kind that carried for miles. An answering cry came back, closer this time. Despite her injuries, the mare moved toward the barn door, her maternal instincts overriding pain. "Wait, you can't go out there," Sarah said, but she was already reaching for her heaviest coat, pulling on gloves. "I'll go." "You stay here." But the mare blocked her path, then deliberately limped to a corner of the stall where Sarah had piled hay. She began pawing at it with her good front leg, revealing what lay beneath, a child's drawing, faded and torn, that must have been hidden in the barn for years. It showed a mare and foal, drawn in crayon with the innocent directness of childhood. Sarah picked up the drawing, stunned. This was my uncle's, she realized. He must have. She looked at the mare, who was watching her intently. "You're trying to tell me something, aren't you?" The foal's cry came again, more desperate now. Sarah made her decision. "Okay, I'm going. But you need to stay here where it's warm." She fought her way out into the storm, the wind nearly knocking her down. Visibility was almost zero, but she followed the sound, calling out reassurances that were snatched away by the gale. Her military training kicked in, navigation in adverse conditions, maintaining orientation despite sensory deprivation. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, she found it. A foal, perhaps 6 months old, huddled against a snowdrift. Its dark coat was crusted with ice, its body trembling violently. When it saw Sarah, it tried to run but collapsed after a few steps. "Hey there, little one," Sarah said softly, approaching slowly. "It's okay. I'm going to help you." The foal's eyes were wild with fear, but exhaustion had robbed it of the strength to flee. Sarah knelt beside it, assessing quickly. Hypothermic, definitely. Malnourished. Some minor cuts, but nothing life-threatening if she could get it warm. "Come on," she murmured, trying to lift the foal. Even at 6 months, it was heavy, too heavy for her to carry in these conditions. "You need to help me out here." "Can you walk?" The foal struggled to its feet, swaying. Sarah supported it as best she could, and together they began the torturous journey back to the barn. The wind fought them every step, snow blinding them, cold seeping into their bones. Several times, Sarah lost her bearings completely. But each time she stopped, uncertain, she heard it, the mare's powerful neigh cutting through the storm, guiding them home. The injured horse was standing in the barn doorway, ignoring her own pain to serve as a beacon. Finally, they stumbled into the barn's relative shelter. The foal collapsed immediately, and Sarah feared she was too late. But the mare limped over, nickering softly, and began licking the ice from the foal's coat with gentle insistence. "That's it," Sarah encouraged, grabbing more blankets. "Help me warm her up." As she worked to dry the foal, rubbing circulation back into its limbs, she noticed something extraordinary. The mare's behavior wasn't just maternal, it was specific, knowledgeable. She was focusing on particular areas, using techniques Sarah had seen wild horses use with their own offspring. "This isn't just any foal," Sarah realized aloud. "You know this baby." The mare met her eyes, and in that gaze, Sarah saw the truth. This foal shared the same distinctive white marking on its forehead, the same refined head shape. Family. Whether the mare's own offspring from a previous season or a relative from her herd, the connection was undeniable. As warmth returned to the foal's body, it began to revive. Hungry, it searched for milk, but the mare hadn't foaled this season and had nothing to give. Sarah remembered the powdered mare's milk replacer in her emergency supplies, purchased on Mitchell's recommendation just in case. She mixed the formula with warm water from the thermos she'd filled before the power went out. The foal was weak but managed to drink, the mare watching every movement with protective intensity. "You knew," Sarah said softly to the mare. "Somehow you knew this baby was out there. That's why you've been so restless these past few days." The mare nickered, still focused on the foal. As the storm continued outside, Sarah found herself thinking about connections, the invisible threads that bind families, herds, units together. In Afghanistan, she'd seen soldiers risk everything to recover fallen comrades, driven by bonds that transcended mere duty. Here was that same force in its purest form, an injured mare standing guard in a blizzard to guide home a lost foal. The foal finished feeding and curled up against the mare's belly. Despite her injured leg, the mare carefully lowered herself to provide warmth and comfort. Sarah watched them, these two survivors of the storm, and felt something shift inside her chest. "Family finds a way," she murmured, thinking of her uncle's hidden drawing, of the mare's unwavering vigil, of her own journey to this moment. "Even when we think we're alone, family finds a way." She settled back into the straw, keeping watch over both horses. The storm would pass, power would return, challenges would continue. But something fundamental had changed. This wasn't just about saving a single horse anymore. It was about rebuilding a family, the mare's, and perhaps her own. The mare looked at her with those knowing eyes and nickered softly, as if to say, "Now you understand." Sarah reached out, her hand steady for the first time in months, and stroked the mare's neck. "Yeah," she whispered. "Now I understand." Spring arrived like a gentle medic, tending to winter's wounds with warm winds and patient sunshine. Sarah stood at the paddock fence, watching Phoenix, the name had come naturally after the mare's resurrection from near death, move across the grass with her distinctive three-beat gait. The limp remained, would always remain, but the horse carried it with dignity rather than defeat. The foal, now named Hope, pranced beside her adoptive mother with the boundless energy of youth. Her dark coat gleamed with health, all traces of that desperate winter night erased except in memory. Phoenix watched her constantly, protective but not restrictive, allowing the young horse to explore while maintaining vigilant awareness. "Never thought I'd see the day," Mitchell commented, joining Sarah at the fence. His veterinary truck held supplies for their monthly checkup, but these visits had become more social than medical lately. "That mare should have been a statistic." "We both should have been," Sarah replied, noting how steady her hands were as she opened the gate. The tremors still came sometimes, usually at night, but they no longer defined her days. Inside the paddock, Phoenix approached with calm confidence. Gone was the wildeed terror of those first weeks. She accepted Mitchell's examination with patience, even leaning into Sarah's touch as he checked her leg. "Remarkable," Mitchell murmured, running his hands along the scarred tissue. "The bone healed stronger than I expected. She'll never race, but for general riding." "She doesn't need to race. She's got a different purpose now." That purpose had revealed itself gradually over the months. Word of Phoenix's recovery had spread through the valley, carried by the same ranchers who'd initially opposed her rescue. Other veterans began appearing at Sarah's gate, some referred by the VA, others drawn by rumors of a woman who understood both horses and hidden wounds. First came Tommy Walsh, a Marine who'd lost his left arm to an IED. He sat in his truck for 20 minutes before finding the courage to approach. Phoenix, with that uncanny sensitivity she'd developed, walked directly to the fence and waited. When Tommy finally reached out with his remaining hand, she stood perfectly still, allowing contact at his pace. Then Maria Gonzalez, Air Force, who hadn't spoken above a whisper since returning from deployment. Phoenix seemed to understand her silence, communicating through gentle touches and shared quiet. After 3 visits, Maria's voice returned, first to the horse, then gradually to humans. Sarah formalized the program without really meaning to. Healing Hooves, she called it, a name that made her cringe initially but stuck despite her resistance. The VA provided referrals, insurance coverage, even helped with liability paperwork. Sarah found herself studying equine therapy techniques, adapting her medical training to this new healing modality. Phoenix became the program's cornerstone. Her visible scars, her obvious limp, her survival story, all served as powerful metaphors for the veterans who came seeking something they couldn't name. Here was living proof that broken didn't mean worthless, that trauma could be transformed into purpose. The mare seemed to understand her role intuitively. She adjusted her approach for each visitor, standing rock still for those who needed stability, offering gentle nuzzles to those craving connection, maintaining distance from those not ready for contact. Sarah often wondered if the horse was reading microexpressions, body language, or something deeper, that soul recognition she'd felt during their first encounter. "She's got about a 90% success rate with initial contact," Sarah told Dr. Peterson, the VA psychiatrist who'd become an unofficial advisor. Better than most therapists. Including me, Peterson laughed. Maybe because she doesn't ask questions they're not ready to answer. The transformation extended beyond the veterans. The ranch itself changed, paths worn smooth by regular visitors, a second paddock added for group sessions, the empty barn stalls converted to a comfortable meeting space. Sarah found herself hosting evening gatherings where veterans groomed horses while sharing stories, or silence, equally valued. The community shifted too. Ray Henderson, who'd warned about following her uncle into bankruptcy, donated lumber for the new shelter. The ranchers who'd complained about precedent began referring their own struggling relatives. Even the feed store owner started setting aside slightly damaged bags at discount, claiming they were taking up space anyway. But the deepest transformation was Sarah's own. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. When they did, she'd slip out to the barn where Phoenix would be waiting, as if the mare sensed her distress across the distance. They'd stand together in the darkness, breathing in rhythm, until the ghosts faded. "You found your calling," Mitchell observed during one visit. "Jake would be proud." Sarah considered this, watching Phoenix demonstrate remarkable patience as a veteran with severe PTSD attempted to brush her mane with shaking hands. "I think he knew. That letter he left, 'The horses will save you if you let them.' He wasn't talking about riding or ranching. He meant this." As if in response, Phoenix turned her head, meeting Sarah's eyes with that penetrating gaze that had first connected them. The mare's expression held something like satisfaction, as if she too had found her purpose in this unlikely partnership. The local news picked up the story. Combat medic creates innovative therapy program with rescued Mustang. The article focused on the facts: number of veterans served, success rates, expansion plans. But it missed the deeper truth: how two broken beings had found each other in their darkest moments and discovered that healing multiplied when shared. Requests poured in from other veterans organizations, from therapy programs seeking to replicate their model. Sarah fielded calls with a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "There's no magic formula," she tried to explain. "It's just about recognizing pain in others because you've felt it yourself." But there was magic, she privately acknowledged. Not the fairy tale kind, but the everyday miracle of connection, of second chances, of purpose emerging from pain. Phoenix embodied that magic, her every movement a testament to resilience. One afternoon, as Sarah was finishing paperwork in the barn office, she heard laughter from the paddock, real, unforced laughter. Through the window, she saw a group of veterans watching Hope attempt to steal a hat from Tommy's head while Phoenix looked on with maternal indulgence. "Look at us," she murmured to herself. "A bunch of broken people and broken horses, making each other whole." Phoenix must have heard her voice because the mare walked to the office window, pressing her nose against the glass. Sarah reached out, palm flat against the pane, mirroring the gesture that had begun their journey. "Thank you," she whispered, not sure if she was addressing the horse, the universe, or her uncle's prescient wisdom. "Thank you for not letting me give up." Phoenix snickered softly, then returned to her duties, positioning herself where a nervous newcomer could approach at their own pace. Sarah watched her work, this mare who'd been hours from euthanasia, now serving as a beacon for others lost in their own storms. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of hope. Sarah's phone buzzed with another referral from the VA. She glanced at the message, then at Phoenix, who was now allowing a trembling veteran to rest their forehead against her neck. "Jake was right," she said aloud, feeling the truth of it settle into her bones. "The horses do save us. But first, we have to save each other." The morning sun cast long shadows across the paddock as Sarah prepared for another day at Healing Hooves. Phoenix stood at the gate, her white blaze catching the light, that familiar knowing look in her eyes. 2 years had passed since that fateful October morning when they'd found each other in the mist. Hope, now a strong yearling, grazed nearby under Phoenix's watchful eye. The ranch bustled with quiet activity, veterans arriving for sessions, volunteers preparing to barn, the soft murmur of conversations beginning to heal old wounds. Sarah's hands moved with confidence as she adjusted Phoenix's special therapeutic saddle pad. The tremors were rare now, usually only surfacing during storms that reminded her body of other times, other places. But even then, Phoenix would find her, press close, and breathe that steady rhythm that said, "You're here. You're safe. You're home. Ready for today's group?" Sarah asked, stroking the mare's neck. Phoenix snickered softly, already positioning herself at the mounting block where a new veteran waited nervously. Sarah smiled, remembering her own first days here, lost, broken, counting fence posts to keep the darkness at bay. Now she counted differently, 23 veterans currently in the program, 14 successful graduations, 5 volunteers who were veterans themselves, finding purpose in helping others. And one remarkable mare who had started it all. As the day's sessions unfolded, Sarah watched Phoenix work her quiet magic. With each veteran, the mare adjusted her approach, standing firm for those who needed an anchor, moving gently for those learning to trust again, simply being present for those who weren't ready for more. The local newspaper had called Phoenix the miracle mare, but Sarah knew better. There was no miracle here, just the hard work of choosing life every day, despite the pain. Phoenix had made that choice in the tangled barbed wire. Sarah had made it in the barn that night. Now they helped others make the same choice. That evening, as the last visitor departed, Sarah and Phoenix stood together at the fence, watching the sun dip behind the mountains. Hope trotted over to join them, the little family they'd built from the wreckage of their separate traumas. "We did good today," Sarah murmured, her hand resting on Phoenix's scarred shoulder. In the distance, a wild horse band moved across the ridge, Phoenix's old herd, perhaps, or their descendants. The mare watched them for a long moment, then turned back to Sarah, pressing her forehead against her chest in that gesture of trust that still made Sarah's heart catch. This was her herd now, this collection of wounded warriors, human and equine, finding their way back to wholeness together. And Sarah, who had once thought herself beyond saving, had become the medic she was always meant to be. Not in a combat zone, but here in this peaceful valley, where broken things learn to stand again. Phoenix whickered softly, bringing Sarah back to the present. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new veterans seeking hope, new moments of connection. But for now, in the golden light of evening, there was just this, a woman and a horse who had saved each other, standing together at the edge of a future they'd fought so hard to claim. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this story. We'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts in the comments below and let us know your favorite part. If you enjoyed the journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more captivating stories like this one. And don't miss out, hit the notification bell so you're always updated on our latest content. Your support truly means the world to us.